She was 8 months pregnant, standing in a dark hallway, holding a glass of water, and through the closed bedroom door she heard her husband say 2 words about her, 2 words that changed everything. Gold digger. He said it low, easy, like he had said it before, like he had been saying it for a long time. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't kick down that door. She went back to the kitchen. She stood at the counter. She stood there for 11 minutes, and she thought, because what her husband didn't know, what his girlfriend didn't know, what nobody in that house knew, was that the company he built his entire identity around, the one he told that story about at every party, the rented office, the $30,000, the long nights, the dream he built from nothing, her father owned 54% of it. Her father, the billionaire, the silent majority shareholder, the man whose name was on the paperwork Douglas had signed 6 years ago and never once connected to the woman he called his wife. He called her a gold digger, while her father owned his company. And she knew. She had just decided what to do about it. This story is for every woman who was made to feel small by someone who only existed because of her. Stay with me, because what happens next will remind you exactly who you are. If this is the kind of story that makes you feel seen, like someone finally told the truth out loud, hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment. Tell me what line hit you first. Share this with the woman in your life who needs to hear it today. She's out there, and she's waiting for exactly this story.
Gold digger. 2 words, spoken low, behind a closed door. Claire stopped walking. The hallway was dark. It was past 10 at night. She had gotten up for water. Her ankles were swollen again. Her back had been aching since 6 o'clock. The baby had been pressing against her ribs for hours. 8 months pregnant. She moved slowly these days. That was the only reason she heard it. She heard it because she was slow. Douglas's voice. Through the bedroom door she had been about to open. She doesn't know what she has. She never did. She just happened to marry well. A pause, the sound of his phone. That particular soft whoosh of a text being sent. Trust me, she has no idea what she's sitting on. Claire stood there. Her hand was 2 inches from the door handle. Her heart was doing something strange. Not racing, not dropping. Just very still. She checked her phone. Screen on. Screen off. Screen on. Screen off. Something to do with her hands. Something to prove she was still standing in the real world. She went back to the kitchen. She got her water. She stood at the kitchen island for 11 minutes before she went back to bed. But let's go back, because you need to understand what the world looked like before that hallway. You need to see what Claire saw. Every morning, when she opened her eyes, the house was beautiful. White oak floors, high ceilings, a kitchen with a marble island and the windows that looked out onto a garden that Claire had planted herself in early autumn. A nursery down the hall, with soft gray walls and hand-painted white branches reaching up toward the ceiling. Not everyone gets a house like that. Not everyone gets a husband like Douglas Merritt. Charming at parties, attentive at the right moments. The kind of man who remembered that you took your coffee with oat milk, not regular milk. The kind of man who once drove 40 minutes to a specific bakery because you had mentioned, once, that their almond croissants were the best you had ever eaten. Claire had noticed all of it. She had been grateful for all of it. She had grown up quietly wealthy. Her father, William Hargrove, was not the kind of man who announced his money. He preferred to be underestimated. Claire had inherited that quality. She wore it like a second skin. The ability to move through a room and leave no particular impression. To be pretty without being remarkable. to be intelligent without threatening anyone. When she met Douglas at a charity dinner 3 years ago, she had not mentioned her father. She never did, in the beginning. She wanted to be seen for herself, just herself, not for what her last name might mean to the right kind of person. He had pursued her with a focused, steady energy that she found deeply appealing. He asked real questions. He listened to the answers. He called when he said he would call. 6 months later, he proposed. She said yes. She thought, I found the good one. The nursery was perfect. Soft gray walls with those hand-painted branches. A maple crib that Douglas had spent 3 weekends assembling himself. A bookshelf full of stories Claire had been collecting since she was a child. Some of them were her own childhood books, rescued from a box in her father's attic. She had arranged the onesies by size, then by color, then by size again. Her best friend Patty had come over on a Tuesday afternoon and sat in the glider, watching Claire rearrange the same stack of tiny white shirts. You've folded those 4 times, Patty said. I know, Claire said. You okay? Claire smiled. I just want everything to be right. Patty watched her for a moment. Her mouth stayed neutral, but her eyes were doing something more complicated, something that wanted to say more than it said. Sure, Patty said. Of course. That had been 6 weeks ago. Claire had been 8 weeks from her due date. She was 6 weeks away now. The house still looked like a dream. The nursery still looked like a magazine. Douglas still kissed her forehead every morning before work. And yet, something had shifted 2 months ago. She could not name it precisely. A coolness in the room when she entered it. A slight delay before he answered questions that should have been easy. A change in how he held his phone, screen down on the table, taken to the bathroom with him, carried the way you carry something valuable that you're afraid someone else might pick up. She had told herself, he's under pressure. The company is in its expansion phase. He's distracted, that's all. She had believed it. She had worked very hard at believing it. Douglas Merritt was 37 years old. He had started Apex Ventures at 31 with 2 business school friends, a rented office in downtown Atlanta, $30,000. By the time he met Claire, the company was worth $11 million. Now it was worth considerably more. He was proud of that story. He told it often, the rented office, the 30,000, the long nights, the first major client. What the story never mentioned was the silent investor who had come in during year 2, when Apex was hemorrhaging cash and Douglas was 3 weeks from shutting it down. The investor who had not asked for a seat at the table. No recognition, just a quiet arrangement, a preferred share structure, a controlling stake held in trust. Douglas knew the name on the paperwork. He had signed the documents himself. What he had not done, in 3 years of dating Claire Hargrove and 1 year of marriage to her, was connect that investor's last name to the woman sleeping beside him. The name Hargrove had not come up. Claire had not made it come up. She had simply been his wife, quietly, without drama, without leverage. She had loved him the way her mother had loved her father, not loudly, but with her whole life rearranged around the fact of him. She had been, to borrow a word she apparently was not supposed to hear, a very good wife. The morning after the hallway, Douglas kissed her forehead. Sleep well? He asked. Fine, she said. He poured coffee, oat milk, not regular. The small, correct gesture that used to feel like evidence of love. It felt like something else now. She could not name what. He left at 7:30. She sat at the kitchen island with her coffee going cold and thought about 2 words. Gold digger. She turned the phrase over in her mind. Who digs gold? Someone who goes looking for it. Someone who seeks it out deliberately, knowing it's there. She hadn't gone looking. She hadn't known. She had hidden the very thing that might have made her look like she was digging. She thought, who is he talking to? She thought, how long has he been saying that? She thought, I'm not imagining this. I know what I heard. Then she thought about the baby pressing against her ribs, and she breathed very slowly through her nose, and she made herself get up and eat breakfast. That was the morning the summer ended. She didn't know it yet. Patty called at 9. How are you feeling? Any contractions? No, Claire said. Still 6 weeks out? You sound weird. I'm fine. Claire, I heard him say something last night. She paused. I don't know what it means yet. A pause on Patty's end. Then carefully, what did he say? He called me a gold digger. He was on the phone. He didn't know I was in the hallway. The pause was longer this time. In that pause, crib bomb, Claire heard something she did not want to hear. The sound of Patty not being surprised. When can I come over? Patty asked. Not yet, Claire said. I need to think first. She said goodbye. She put the phone down on the island. She ran her hand across her stomach, the round, hard curve of her daughter. Solid, real, present. I know, she said quietly, to the empty kitchen, to no one. I know what I heard. She did not confront him that evening. She made dinner, grilled salmon, asparagus, the sourdough he liked from the bakery on Ponce de Leon Avenue. She set the table the way she always did. She lit the candle. She sat across from him and watched his face the way you watch a weather map, looking for pressure systems, almost invisible shifts, the small indicators of what is coming. He ate and talked about a potential client in Phoenix. He mentioned a deal that could close before the end of the quarter. He asked whether she had called the pediatrician about the newborn care appointment. She answered every question. She watched his hands, the way he set his fork down to check his phone. Briefly, screen down again, back into his pocket. One smooth motion, not checking sports scores, not checking a work email. The motion was too practiced, too small to be innocent. She had noticed it before. She had filed it under stress and busy season, and you're overthinking. She did not file it that way anymore. That night, while Douglas slept, or seemed to sleep, Claire sat in the nursery. The small lamp was on, a glass of water on the side table. The rocker creaked slightly as she moved. She rocked and thought. She was not a panicking person by nature. Her father had raised her in a house where emotion was not dismissed, but where action was valued more. You feel it. Then you figure out what to do about it. That was William Hargrove's philosophy in one sentence. The feeling right now was, something is very wrong. The action required was, find out exactly what. She thought about credit card statements. She hadn't looked at them in months. Douglas paid the bills. The shared card went to an email address she barely used anymore. She would look in this morning. She rocked. The baby moved, a slow rolling pressure against her left side. I know, Claire thought. I know, we're going to be okay. She was not entirely sure she believed it. The email contained 11 statements. She had not opened them since February. It was now late November. She opened the most recent one first. The hotel charge was on the 14th, $47, a small hotel, not an expensive one. The one before that was on the 8th, same hotel, $62. The one before that was on the 23rd of the previous month, same hotel, different date. She went back one more month, 3 charges, same hotel. She did not move for a very long time. She was not thinking dramatically. She was not thinking, my life is over, my marriage is a lie. She was thinking something smaller and more precise. How long? Just that. How long has this been happening? She did not Google the hotel. She did not call anyone. She closed the laptop and placed it on the nightstand and lay down on her left side. The only position that was comfortable now, at 8 months. She looked at the wall. The nursery was through that wall. Her daughter was inside her body. Douglas was downstairs on a phone call, his voice too low to hear the words, but audible enough to know he was talking to someone. She thought, I am not imagining this. I know what I saw. She fell asleep. She was not sure how, but she did. The next 2 weeks had a texture she would struggle later to describe. Not dramatic, not a sudden devastating revelation, more like standing in a field and watching, from very far away, a slow fire moving toward you. You can see it clearly. You have time to think about it. Somehow that makes it worse. Small signs, each one arriving quietly, each one fitting into a space that had been waiting for it. The perfume came on a Tuesday. She went to move his suit jacket from the back of the dining chair where he had left it. The smell stopped her. Not her perfume, a different one, sweet and slightly synthetic. Something younger than what she wore. She put the jacket on the chair in his closet and said nothing. The phone, he had started leaving it face down everywhere. The kitchen counter, the coffee table, the bathroom. She noticed because she herself never left her phone face down. She had never had a reason to. The evenings out. He had always worked late occasionally. Now it was 4 times in 2 weeks. Client dinners, he said. She had not asked for names. She was not ready for names. Not yet. Patty came over on a Thursday. They sat in the kitchen with herbal tea, and Patty watched Claire with that careful expression that Claire was learning to read more clearly now. You've known something was off, Claire said. It was not a question. Patty set down her mug. Honey, yes. How long? A feeling since the summer? Something more solid? Patty paused. His holiday party last year, the way he introduced you. He did it like he was checking a box. Claire nodded. What else? He makes you smaller, Patty said quietly. Not loudly. Not in front of a lot of people, but in small ways. He finishes your sentences wrong. He laughs at your ideas first, then agrees with them later, like they were his. She stopped. I've been wanting to say this for a year, Patty said. Say it. He treats you like an accessory, a beautiful, useful, very well-behaved accessory. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed slowly on the wet street. He called me a gold digger, Claire said. On the phone? To someone. Patty did not look surprised. She looked sad. I know you, Claire. You've been thinking about this for weeks, and making dinner and folding baby clothes, and not saying anything because you wanted to be sure first. I want to be sure. You're already sure. Claire looked at her tea. I might be. He never saw me, she thought. He saw what I could do for his image. She did not say that out loud, not yet. It was still too new and too tender, like a bruise in the first hour, when the full color hadn't come in yet. The company holiday party was on the second Friday of December. Douglas's party, Apex Ventures, 130 employees, catered, held at the West Side Provisions event space downtown. Claire had been to this party every year of their relationship. She knew the caterers. She knew which clients to smile warmly at. She knew which employees had children she should ask about. She dressed carefully. The maternity dress was deep green silk, borrowed from Agnes Whitmore, who had held onto it for decades and had Claire's exact proportions in pregnancy. Agnes had pinned it in 2 places. It was elegant without being effortful. Douglas looked at her when she came downstairs. You look beautiful, he said. She smiled. Thank you. She watched his eyes. He was looking at her the way you look at something you used to want and no longer do, with a kind of nostalgic appreciation. A museum piece, very nice. Moving on now. She put her coat on. They went to the party. She saw Renee Calloway at 45 minutes in. She did not know the name yet. She just saw the woman. 28 maybe, dark hair, a red dress that knew exactly what it was doing, standing near the bar with a glass of champagne, laughing at something a man beside her was saying. Then the man shifted. She saw his profile, the laugh, the angle of the woman's body, leaning toward him, the particular lean of someone who has rearranged herself around another person's gravity. Douglas. He turned and saw Claire watching. His smile changed, smoothed itself out into something more deliberate. He said something to the woman, "Excuse me," or something like that. He came across the room. "There you are," he said. "Come meet some people." Claire let herself be steered. She smiled. She made conversation. She said all the right things. But she watched Renee Calloway for the rest of the evening. And Renee Calloway, at one point, glanced at Claire's pregnant belly. Her expression was not quite pity and not quite contempt. Something between the two, something that said, "You think that matters." In the car on the way home, Douglas talked about the party. Who had impressed him? A deal that might close before the new year. The music choice had been slightly off. Claire said, "Who was the woman in the red dress, near the bar?" A very small pause. "Renee? She's a new account manager. Good at her job." "She seemed comfortable with you?" "I've been working closely with her team on the Phoenix account." "Right," Claire said. She looked out the window at the city lights, the cold, dark streets of December, her own reflection faint in the glass. "She knew which order I'd take my coffee," Claire said. "I didn't mention it. You must have told her." Silence. "You're reading into things," Douglas said. "You're 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and you're reading into things." She said nothing. He never loved me, she thought. He loved the idea of me, the image, the quiet wife who made everything look right and asked for very little. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the city lights. She thought about what came next. Because she was a woman who thought about what came next before she said a single word. And she was beginning to understand that she needed a plan before she made a single move. She called Frank Aldridge on a Monday morning. She had not spoken to him in 3 years. Frank was the family attorney, her family's attorney. He had managed Hargrove Estate matters since before Claire was born. He was 51 years old and had the particular quality of men who have seen everything, unshockable, unhurried, quietly prepared for the worst at all times. He picked up on the second ring. "Claire? Frank, I need to ask you something. Go ahead." "The Hargrove Trust, the preferred shares in Apex Ventures. Who holds proxy voting rights if my father chooses to transfer control?" A pause, not of surprise. Frank Aldridge did not pause in surprise. He paused to consider what Claire was actually asking. "You or a designated trustee," he said, "per the amendment your father signed in 2019, the one that came after your wedding. After your wedding." "He amended it after I married Douglas?" she asked. "He was being cautious. He loves you very much." Claire sat very still. She was in her father's home study. She had driven there that morning, walking in through the front door and into the familiar smell of cedar and old paper that had meant safe to her entire childhood. "Frank," she said, "I think I need to understand exactly what my father owns." What William Hargrove owned was this: 54% of Apex Ventures, through a series of holding company arrangements that had been deliberately obscured at the time of investment, not for any illegal reason, simply because William Hargrove did not believe in fanfare. He had put in $4 million in year 2 of Apex Ventures. He had looked at the business plan and seen something real. A mutual contact had told him Douglas Merritt was smart and hardworking and hungry. He had not known at the time that Douglas would one day marry his daughter. When he found out, he had said very little. He had updated his estate documents. He had taken careful note. He had watched. He had not told Claire. He had not wanted to influence her marriage. had not wanted her to wonder whether Douglas loved her or loved her proximity to money. He had wanted her to have a real chance at something real. Claire sat in her father's study with the documents Frank had emailed over and read them twice. 54%. Douglas owned 20%. His two partners owned the remaining 26 between them. Her father owned Apex Ventures. Douglas did not know. She sat in the parked car in her father's driveway for 22 minutes before she could make herself drive home. The engine was off. The heat was fading. She watched the lights in the windows of the house, the warm yellow of the kitchen, a neighbor walking a dog across the street in the cold. She held this new knowledge the way you hold something that is both very heavy and very fragile at the same time. He has no idea. He has been calling me a gold digger. He has been taking his girlfriend to a hotel on Piedmont Road. He has been treating me like furniture. And he has no idea that the company he is most proud of, the company he tells that story about, the $30,000, and the rented office and the long nights that company exists because of my father's money. She thought I could walk into our house right now and tell him. She thought, no. She thought, not yet. She drove home. She made tea. She smiled at the right moments. She went to bed. She stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Her father called the next morning. He had a voice that moved slowly and landed firmly. You always knew where you stood with William Hargrove. He said things once, clearly, and did not repeat them. Frank tells me you called. He shouldn't have told you. He works for me. He works for the family. Same thing. A pause, then softer. Are you all right, sweetheart? The word sweetheart. The one soft word he ever used, the one he had been saying since she was small enough for him to carry, it broke something open inside her. Not widely, just a crack. Just enough. No, she said, not entirely. Tell me. She told him everything. The hallway. The 2 words. The hotel charges. The perfume on his jacket. Renee at the holiday party. The 18 months of quiet dismissals. The sentences finished wrong. The laugh before the agreement. The steady lowering of her confidence. So gradual, she had almost not noticed it happening. Her father listened. He did not interrupt. He did not escalate. When she finished, there was a silence. Then William Hargrove said, "He doesn't know about the shares." No. Does he know about me? About who I am? I don't think he ever put it together. I never made it easy to find out. I wanted him to love me, for me. Another silence. Longer this time. I know, her father said. I know you did, sweetheart. Something moved through his voice. Not anger exactly. Something older, quieter, something that had been waiting a long time to speak. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know yet. I need to know more first. Then find out more. I'm here when you're ready. He said goodbye. She held the phone against her chest after the call ended, just for a moment, just to feel the weight of it. Then she made a list, on paper, with a pen. Things I can control right now. 1. Find an attorney. 2. Understand the company structure fully. 3. Protect the baby. 4. Breathe. She folded the list. She put it in the pocket of her cardigan. She went to make lunch. The second phone appeared on a Wednesday. She had gone into Douglas's home office looking for a spare charger. The kind of ordinary domestic errand that assumes you know everything about the spaces you share. The phone was in the interior pocket of his briefcase, tucked in. Not hidden well, just not expected to be found by someone who wasn't supposed to be looking. She did not open it. She placed it back exactly as she had found it. Then she stood in the doorway of his office for a long moment, looking at the briefcase on the shelf. I was being managed, she thought, not loved, managed. She walked back to the kitchen. She sat at the island. She breathed. The anonymous message arrived that same week. It came through her personal Instagram, an account she didn't recognize. No name, just a string of letters and numbers, a blurred profile photo. The message said, "Check the Phoenix account file." He put her name on the consulting contract. Paid from company funds. She stared at the message for a long time. She forwarded it to Frank. Frank called back within 2 hours. "The consulting contract exists," he said. 3 months old, $60,000 paid quarterly. Renee Calloway, listed as external marketing consultant for the Phoenix acquisition. The work described in the contract does not match the billable hours claimed. Claire set her jaw. "He used company money to pay his mistress," she said. "It appears so." She exhaled slowly. "The hardest part is admitting I knew all along," she thought. "Not the specifics, not this detail, but the shape of it. The shape had been there for months, soft and unnameable. Now it had edges. "What does that mean legally?" she asked. "Several things," Frank said carefully, "some of which are very relevant to the board." "I thought it might be," Claire said. She Googled Darvo at 2:45 in the morning. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. She read the definition 3 times. "You're overreacting. That's not what it looks like. You're making everything about you. Do you know how hard I work for this family?" She had heard every one of those sentences in the past year. She deleted the search history. Then she made a new list. On paper, with a pen, every incident she could remember, every dismissal, every redirection, every time she had walked away from an argument feeling like she was the problem. The list was 2 pages long. She folded both pages carefully. She put them in the zippered inner pocket of her hospital bag, the bag that was already packed and waiting in the nursery. Then she went back to bed. She lay on her left side and listened to the house and thought, "I am not crazy. I know what I saw. I know what has been done to me. And I know exactly what I am going to do about it." Her daughter moved, slow, rolling, present. "I know," Claire thought. "I know. It happened on a Saturday." She had chosen Saturday deliberately. No work call for Douglas to escape to, no scheduled obligation, just the 2 of them in the house. Late morning, nowhere to be, nowhere to hide. She waited until he had his coffee. Then she sat at the kitchen island. She had placed 3 things on the counter in front of his chair: the printed credit card statements, the consulting contract Frank had obtained through legitimate discovery channels, and the Instagram message, printed on plain white paper. She did not arrange them aggressively. She set them down the way you set down documents you have reviewed carefully, with a specific, clear intention behind each one. Douglas came into the kitchen in his weekend clothes. He saw her face first, then the papers. She watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. She had watched him calculate before, at parties, in meetings she had attended with him, in the moments before he decided how to answer a difficult question. His face had a particular stillness in those moments, a slight quiet behind the eyes. He sat down. He looked at the statements. "I can explain those," Fitty said. "I know you can," she said. "You're good at explaining, sir." Silence. "The hotel," she said. 14 times in 6 months. Always the same one. Always the same $40 to $80 range. She looked at him. "Not a client dinner." "Claire, the consulting contract." She pushed that paper toward him. $60,000. Paid from Apex operating funds. To Renee Calloway, listed as external marketing consultant for the Phoenix acquisition. She paused. "Using company money to pay your mistress is not just a personal matter, Douglas. It's misappropriation of corporate funds." He had gone very still. "And this? The Instagram message? I don't know who sent it. It doesn't matter. It gave me a reason to look. And I looked." The kitchen was completely quiet. She could hear the refrigerator humming. She could hear her own heartbeat. Not fast, not panicked, just very, very present. Anger has frozen into something else entirely, she thought. It has frozen into determination, and determination is colder than anger, and much harder to move. She had cried already. She needed Douglas to understand that. She had done the crying privately, alone in the nursery at 2 in the morning, pressing her face into a pillow while her daughter moved inside her. She had felt all of it. The grief, the humiliation, the fury so hot, it frightened her. She had done all of that without him. Here, now, she was ice. Douglas's first response was exactly what she expected. You went through my things. I found a briefcase charger. The phone was inside. That's a violation of... Douglas? Her voice. Low. Steady, like a line drawn in something permanent. Do not. He stopped. She looked at him across the kitchen island that she had chosen and paid for herself before the wedding, and said, I am 8 months pregnant. I have been 8 months pregnant while you have been taking your girlfriend to a hotel on Piedmont Road. I have been making your dinners and attending your company parties and folding your shirts. I have been doing all of that while you called me. She paused. One beat. A gold digger. On the phone. To someone. The silence was different now. He had not expected her to know about that. She saw it move across his face. That's... I was in the hallway, she said. I was getting water. You didn't hear me because I move slowly now. Because I'm 8 months pregnant, carrying our daughter. He said nothing. Here's what is going to happen, Claire said. I'm going to ask you to leave this house by tonight. I'm going to call my attorney. You're going to call yours. And when the time comes, we are going to proceed with complete clarity and complete honesty, which will be a significant change from the past year and a half. Claire, we need to talk about this like adults. We are talking about it. You're not being rational. I'm being extremely rational. She looked at him without flinching. That is what is frightening you right now. She stood up. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. She stood anyway. I'm going to get dressed. When I come back down, I'd like you to begin packing a bag. She walked out of the kitchen. She walked upstairs. She closed the bedroom door behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. Long, slow breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique her doctor had taught her for managing labor pain. It worked, it turned out, for other kinds of pain as well. I stayed because I thought love meant surviving the hard parts, she thought. I was wrong about what the hard parts were. Douglas did not leave that day. He did not shout. He did not beg. He did what she had least expected. He got very quiet and very reasonable, which was somehow worse than either of the other options. He said he was not having a secret affair. He said the hotel charges were a misunderstanding. A colleague had used his card. The consulting contract was a legitimate arrangement that she didn't have full context to understand. The Instagram message was from someone who wanted to cause problems. He said all of it without raising his voice. He said it with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed for exactly this moment. Claire listened. She said very little. Later that afternoon, she texted Patty. He's using the reasonable voice, the one that makes you feel like you're the unstable one. Patty responded within 30 seconds. Classic. Don't let it work. It did not work. But it made her more careful. It made her understand that he was not going to make this easy. He was not going to confess. He was not going to crumble. He was going to be measured and plausible and just reasonable enough to manufacture doubt. She was not going to let him manufacture doubt. She called Frank again that afternoon. She asked about divorce proceedings in Georgia, asset protection, the proxy structure, specifically whether she could act independently of her father. Frank listened to all of it. When she was finished, he said, "You're 32 years old and 8 months pregnant, and you're thinking more clearly than most people I've worked with in 30 years. Thank you, Frank. If you need to move quickly, I can be ready. I may need you to be ready by the end of the month. Then I'll be ready. She hung up. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the Apex Ventures quarterly report Douglas kept in the shared family cloud storage. She read it carefully. She looked at the board structure. She looked at the agenda items for the upcoming fourth quarter review meeting, scheduled for January 6th, 3 days before her due date. She made a note on the paper she kept by the keyboard, then she underlined it. A dinner with Seth Granger and his wife Carolyn came on a Thursday evening 2 weeks later. Claire attended because she was not going to give Douglas the advantage of her absence. The conversation turned, as conversations in their circle often did, to business, to Apex, to the upcoming board meeting. Seth made a joke about the restructuring. Douglas laughed. Comfortable, too warm. Biggest change we've ever done, Seth said. Should put us in a completely different position. Long time coming, Douglas agreed. Seth's wife, Carolyn, looked at Claire. Are you following all of this? The business side? And Douglas said, carelessly, the carelessness of a man who has stopped thinking of his wife as someone worth listening to. Claire doesn't really involve herself in the business. She's more a small wave of his hand. Domestic focus right now. Claire smiled. She sipped her water. She said, Of course. Carolyn looked at her with an expression too quick to fully read. Seth looked at his plate. Somewhere along the way, I became invisible, Claire thought. But I see everything. I see all of it. And I have been seeing it for longer than any of you know. She drove home that night feeling something crystallize inside her completely. Not anger, not grief, not bitterness, purpose, clean and hard and entirely her own. The proxy transfer was finalized on December 28th. Frank Aldridge called at 9 in the morning. It's done, he said. You hold voting proxy for the Hargrove shares, 54%, effective immediately. She exhaled, long and slow, like putting something down that she'd been carrying for a very long time. The board meeting is January 6th, she said. I'll prepare the documentation. Everything will be ready. There's also the compensation misappropriation, the consulting contract. I've spoken with a specialist. It's actionable, but the timing matters. After the board meeting. Agreed. Frank, she paused. Thank you for all of it. Claire, he said, it is genuinely my honor. She told Douglas on January 3rd that she had retained an attorney for divorce proceedings. He was on his laptop in the study. He looked up slowly. His expression moved through several phases. Surprise, recalibration, something that looked briefly like relief. Then something harder, more calculated. That's premature, he said. I don't think so. We haven't tried counseling. No, she said. We haven't, and I'm not going to. Not because I haven't thought about it, but because what you've done isn't a communication problem. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, you're making a significant mistake. I'll take that under consideration, she said. She went upstairs. She sat in the rocker in the nursery. Starting over feels impossible, she thought. But staying is worse. Staying was already killing me slowly, and I refused to finish dying. She rocked. Her daughter was quiet tonight, just a steady, solid presence. We're going to be okay, Claire said softly, to the room, to the baby, to herself. This time she meant it completely. The board meeting was at 10 in the morning on January 6th. Claire's contractions started at 6:45. She lay in bed, Douglas already awake and showering, already preparing for the meeting he believed would change everything, and she timed the contractions with the calm precision she had been practicing for weeks. 3 minutes apart. 45 seconds each. Consistent. She got up. She got dressed. She called Dr. Marsh. How far apart? Lena asked immediately. 3 minutes. Consistent for the past 40 minutes. Claire? A pause. You need to come in now. I have something I need to do first. You are in active labor. I know. I have 30 minutes. Maybe 45. A brief silence. Then, in the voice of a woman who has worked with many pregnant women and has learned which battles are worth fighting. Claire, I'll be there by 8, I promise. She hung up. She sat at the desk in Douglas's study. His desk, his chair, his name on the letterhead of a company that her father's money had kept alive. She opened her laptop. The proxy voting documents were already prepared. Frank had sent the full packet the night before. She opened it, read it through one final time. A contraction moved through her. Long, slow, a wave. She breathed through it the way Lena had taught her. In, out. Don't fight it. Let it move. Then she picked up her pen. 3 documents. The proxy vote against the compensation restructuring proposal, the motion to open a board-level inquiry into misappropriation of company funds, the written notice to the board chair of the incoming conflict of interest investigation. She signed all 3. Her own pen, her own name, her own authority. She exhaled. She closed the laptop. She emailed the signed documents to Frank. She watched the sending indicator on her phone until the confirmation appeared. Sent. 7:51 in the morning. She picked up her hospital bag from the nursery doorway. It had been packed for 2 weeks, everything folded and ordered and ready. She walked down the stairs. Douglas was in the kitchen. He looked at the hospital bag. He looked at her face. Are you? Yes, she said. I'm in labor. He was immediately and genuinely alarmed. She saw it. And it was, she would think about this later, one of the most disorienting moments of the entire experience. Seeing real concern in his face, real fear. Knowing it was not incompatible with everything else. People were complicated, even the ones who had hurt you most. I'll drive you. Agnes is coming, she said. Agnes? He blinked. Claire, I should... Agnes is coming, she said again. He stood there. He looked at her. Something in her face told him this was not a negotiation. She had made arrangements. She did not need or want him to insert himself into this particular moment. He said, quietly, Are you sure you don't want me there? Another contraction moved through her. She breathed through it. She stood straight. I want you at your board meeting, she said. She went outside to wait for Agnes. The air was cold. The sky was gray. The yard was brown with winter. She stood on the porch with her hospital bag and breathed the cold air and felt very calm, calmer than she had felt in months. Agnes Whitmore arrived in 8 minutes. She took one look at Claire standing on the porch and said simply, Okay, let's go. She did not ask any questions. That was one of the things Claire loved most about her. In the car, during a contraction, Claire pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window. The city was still dark at 7:15. Street lights made orange halos in the morning mist. A delivery truck rolled past. Someone walking a dog, bundled in a coat. He's not coming? Agnes asked. He's not coming. Good. Claire almost laughed. It wasn't funny. She almost laughed anyway. Dr. Marsh met them in the hospital corridor with the expression of a woman whose professional advice had been disregarded, but who had decided to move forward productively. She assessed Claire quickly. Documents signed? She asked. Signed and sent, Claire said. Good, Lena said. Then let's have a baby. It was 11 hours. Not dramatically dangerous, not requiring intervention beyond the epidural at hour 4. but long and exhausting, and conducted for most of it with Agnes sitting beside the bed holding Claire's hand. Agnes was the right kind of company. She did not talk unnecessarily. She did not offer comfort that was not asked for. She simply sat there, solid, present, the way she had been present for 30 years. Claire slept in fragments. She thought in fragments. The pain was manageable. Underneath it was another kind of pain, the grief she had been holding carefully for weeks, the one she had not let herself full feel, because feeling it meant acknowledging the full scope of what had been done. She let herself feel it now, because she had done what she needed to do. The documents were sent. Frank had confirmed at 7:52. The board meeting had started at 10. She had received his text at 11:41. The votes were counted. The proposal failed. Motion to investigate approved. Well done. She had read that text in the middle of a contraction. She had cried. Not from the pain, or not only from the pain. I deserve to keep breathing, she thought, even right now, even in this very long and very difficult day. Her daughter was born at 6:17 in the evening. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, dark hair, eyes the color of a winter morning, not quite gray, not quite blue, something between the two. She made a sound when she arrived, strong and clear and certain, the kind of sound that means, I am here, I intend to be here, I am not going anywhere. Agnes made a sound too, something wordless, something that came from a place that had no vocabulary. Claire held her daughter against her chest, skin to skin, the warmth of her, the impossible small weight. She counted the fingers. She counted them again. She lost count. She started over. 10 fingers, 10 toes, one perfectly complete person. She is mine, Claire thought. She is safe. That is enough for right now. That is everything. Douglas arrived at 8:45 that evening. He had been at the board meeting. While his daughter was born. Claire had not called him. Lena had not called him. Agnes had certainly not called him. He walked in wearing his conference clothes, pale, trying to compose his face into something warm and present. But she could see the day on him, the way a bad day sits on a person differently from a good one. He had the particular look of someone who had walked into something he had not seen coming. Something had happened in that boardroom before he found out about the birth. He came to the edge of the bed and looked at the baby. Something real moved across his face then. Something that was not calculated, not performed. He was looking at his daughter for the first time, and whatever he felt in that moment was genuine. She was certain of it. She's beautiful, he said. Yes, Claire said. He looked at Claire. How are you? Tired. A pause. He was trying to read her expression. She was not giving him much to read. The board meeting sai chvidipam, he started. I know, she said. He went very still. You know? His voice shifted, the warmth still underneath, but something harder over it now, something calculating behind the eyes. What do you know, exactly? She looked at him for a long moment. Her daughter was breathing softly against her chest, the steady, small warmth of her. Enough, Claire said. Agnes stood up from the corner chair. She walked to the doorway. She stood there with her arms crossed and said nothing. Her presence in that doorway said everything. We should talk, Douglas said. We will, Claire said. But not tonight. Claire? Not tonight, Douglas. Her voice level. Not unkind, just final. Tonight I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow you're going to receive something from Frank Aldridge, and then we're going to move forward. He looked at her, a long look. Then he looked at the baby once more, at the dark hair and the small closed fists and the impossible newness of her. What's her name? He asked. Claire looked down at her daughter. Margaret, she said, for my mother. He nodded. He turned and left. Agnes stayed in the doorway until the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. Then she came back to the chair. She sat down. She poured herself a cup of hospital tea. She said nothing. Outside the window, Atlanta was dark and quiet. The monitors beeped softly. Margaret slept against her mother's chest, with the absolute confidence of someone who has arrived in exactly the right place. Claire closed her eyes. She breathed. She is mine. Frank Aldridge arrived the next morning at 9:30. He wore a gray suit, leather briefcase, the expression of a man who is comfortable carrying the weight of important things. He set a folder on the hospital tray table. Divorce petition, he said. Asset protection filings. And the initial documentation for the board investigation, which is moving quickly. How quickly? Claire asked. They suspended Douglas's executive authority this morning, pending review. The consulting contract has been flagged by the compliance attorney. It's not a minor issue. She opened the folder, read the first page. Irreconcilable differences. As if what had happened was simply two people drifting apart. As if it were weather. As if it had nothing to do with choices made deliberately over a long period of time. She signed where Frank indicated. Her hand was steadier than she expected. Frank took the folder back carefully. He looked at Margaret, asleep in the hospital bassinet. Congratulations, he said, quietly, like he meant it fully. Thank you, Frank, for all of it. He picked up his briefcase. I'll be in touch by end of day. He left. Claire looked at her daughter. She took out her phone and called her father. He answered immediately. How is she? He asked. No preamble at all. Perfect, Claire said. A sound from him. Brief. Entirely uncharacteristic of William Hargrove. Something that might have been a caught breath. Something that had no name. Margaret, Claire said. I named her Margaret. A very long silence. Your mother would have... He stopped. He started again. When can I come? Now, she said. Come now. William Hargrove arrived at noon, impeccably dressed, dark suit, no tie. He had driven himself. He walked in, and a nurse stepped aside for him, without quite knowing why. People did that with William Hargrove. He stopped in the doorway of room 412. His daughter was sitting up in the bed. The winter light came through the window and fell across both of them, Claire and Margaret. The baby awake now, dark-haired, looking at the world with the steady curiosity of someone who has just arrived and is taking inventory. William Hargrove stood in a doorway in a hospital in Atlanta and cried, not loudly, not dramatically, 2 tears, precisely, before he composed himself and walked in. Claire had never seen her father cry before, not once in her entire life. Hi, Dad, she said. He sat in the chair beside the bed. He looked at Margaret for a long time, then he reached out, very carefully, and Claire placed the baby in his arms. He held her with total focus, complete stillness, as if the entire world had narrowed to this small, warm, extraordinary person. Hello, he said quietly. I'm your grandfather. I have been waiting to meet you for a very long time. Claire watched her father hold her daughter. She felt something shift inside her, something compressed and tight for months, maybe years, slowly beginning to release, like a fist unclenching, like a window opening. I was never the problem, she thought. I was the solution he didn't deserve. She went home on the 3rd day. Agnes had prepared everything. The house was clean. The nursery lamp was on, warm and soft. There was soup on the stove. The vegetable soup Agnes made for every significant occasion. Graduations, funerals, the night Claire's mother had died, 20 years ago. The soup that always tasted like, you are not alone. Douglas was not there. He had moved to a hotel. Frank had arranged temporary occupancy agreements for the marital home. He could not remove her. He could not pressure her to leave. Frank had been very clear. Claire walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen, the dining room, the living room where the impression of Douglas still sat in his particular chair. The hallway where she had stood 8 weeks ago with a glass of water and 2 words she had not expected to hear. She stopped at the door to his study. She stood there for a moment, then she walked past it. Upstairs, she put Margaret in the bassinet beside her bed. She stood at the window. The backyard was brown with winter, dead grass, bare branches. The garden she had planted in October, now frozen and seemingly gone, but not gone. She knew gardens. The roots were there, waiting, doing their quiet work underground. Starting over feels impossible, she thought, but I am already doing it. I am standing here, doing it right now. She turned from the window and went to sit beside Margaret. She counted the fingers. 10, the toes, 10, started over, again. We are going to be fine, she thought. More than fine. Patty came on day 4. Food from 3 different restaurants. A bag of things Claire might need and hadn't thought to ask for. A bottle of sparkling cider. She stood in the kitchen with her coat still on and her eyes very bright. Claire held up Margaret. Patty sat down heavily on a kitchen stool and said, "She is perfect. She is completely and entirely perfect." "I know," Claire said. "How are you actually doing?" Claire sat down across from her. "Some hours I feel strong. Some hours I think about the last 3 years, and I get this." She pressed a hand to her chest. This hollow ache, like I'm grieving someone who isn't dead. "You are grieving someone," Patty said. "You're grieving who you thought he was." "Yes." Claire looked at the table. "And also who I was. The version of me who kept believing him. That version wasn't stupid," Patty said firmly. "She was trying to love someone. She deserved better than what she got." Claire nodded slowly. "I know. I'm working on remembering that. She looked at her best friend across the kitchen table, the cider, the food from 3 restaurants, Margaret asleep in the bassinet by the window, the bare winter backyard beyond the glass. Exhausted, she thought, but still here, still breathing, beginning to laugh again. And then Patty said, "Okay, but can we just acknowledge the poetry? Can we just take one moment to appreciate that his company has existed for 6 years because of your father's money, and he spent all that time calling you the gold digger?" And Claire laughed, actually laughed, clear and real and completely unexpected. "We can appreciate it," she said, "because if that's not the universe having a sense of humor—" "It is," Claire said. "It really, really is." The divorce moved in stages. The asset division was the most complex part, and Frank handled it with the methodical care of someone who had been waiting years to be useful in exactly this way. The house went to Claire. The joint accounts were divided fairly and thoroughly. Douglas received his personal assets, his car, his clothing, his original 20% stake in what remained of his apex position, which was worth considerably less now than it had been in December. The board investigation had changed the valuation conversation significantly. Primary custody of Margaret went to Claire. Douglas had visitation rights. She had not wanted to eliminate them. Margaret deserved the chance to know her father. She had made that decision with clear eyes and without bitterness, because it was the right decision for her daughter, not for Douglas, not for herself, for Margaret. That distinction mattered. Barbara Merritt called on a Tuesday afternoon. Douglas's mother, 62 years old, practiced in the particular politeness of women who have learned to use courtesy as a weapon. "I want you to know," Barbara said, "that I think both parties have made mistakes here." Claire sat at the kitchen island and held the phone. "Both parties," she said. "Marriages are complex, Claire. Douglas isn't perfect. I know that, but—" "Barbara, they stop," Claire said, gently. "I'm going to stop you there. This is not a conversation I'm going to have right now. When the legal process is complete, if you'd like to discuss Margaret's relationship with you as her grandmother, I'm very open to that. But this particular conversation isn't one I'm available for. A pause. I see, Barbara said. I hope you do, Claire said. I really do. She hung up. She made herself a cup of tea. She stood at the window and looked at the backyard and thought, I used to change what I was saying in the middle of sentences to make sure nobody was uncomfortable. I used to edit myself before I spoke to make sure I wasn't too much. That is finished now. She thought about those months a lot, in the evenings after Margaret was asleep and the house was quiet. Not obsessively, not with the particular pain of wounds that won't close, more the way you might think about a year you lived somewhere and then moved away from. Recognizing the geography, understanding that you are elsewhere now. She thought about the person she had been inside that marriage, how she had arrived in it with a clear sense of herself and had gradually, almost imperceptibly, become someone who took up less space, who qualified her opinions before she offered them, who found herself apologizing for reactions that did not require apology. It had not happened suddenly. That was the thing she kept coming back to. It had happened in inches. She had called it love. She had called it consideration. She had called it being a good partner. It wasn't love, she thought now. It was disappearing on purpose, a little at a time, until I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She breathed. She was recognizing herself again, one day at a time. It was slow work. It was the most important work she had ever done. The message from Renee Calloway arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 12 days after Margaret was born. Frank called to tell her, "She wants to speak with you," he said. "Not through attorneys, directly. She says she has documentation that Douglas misrepresented the company's financial structure to her. She made certain decisions based on information she was given. She says she was manipulated." A long pause. "She was misled," Claire said slowly. "It appears so. She's not asking for sympathy. She's offering cooperation in exchange for bslepum." Frank paused. "I think she wants out of the narrative she's been cast in." Claire thought about the woman in the red dress with the champagne glass, the laugh near the bar, the look at her pregnant belly that she had first read as contempt. Not contempt, she reconsidered now. Fear, the look of someone performing a role they weren't entirely sure they had chosen. People were complicated, even this one. "Set up the call," Claire said. It lasted 45 minutes. Renee Calloway spoke carefully, clearly, with the tone of someone who has rehearsed this and then decided that honesty was the only viable strategy remaining. She had met Douglas 18 months ago through a professional contact. He had told her the marriage was over in every meaningful sense, a formality, a matter of timing, and a complicated pregnancy he didn't want to destabilize. He had told her she was what he actually wanted. He had told her, when she raised concerns, that Claire's father was a minor regional investor with some legacy ties to Apex. No real stake, no practical significance. Renee was quiet for a moment. "I Googled William Hargrove eventually," she said. "Not until 3 weeks ago." Claire said nothing. "I know saying I'm sorry doesn't—" Renee stopped, started again. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want the record to be accurate. I was lied to. So were you. About different things and in different ways, but we were both lied to." Claire held the phone. Margaret was in the carrier, against her chest, asleep, her small face tucked in. The warmth of her, the steady small breathing. "The documentation you mentioned," Claire said finally. "His representations to you about the share structure. Will you provide that to the board?" "Yes." "And to my attorney?" "Yes." A pause. "Thank you," Claire said. I'm sorry, Renee said. It was not enough. Nothing would be enough. But it was something real. And something real, right now, was worth more than nothing. The board suspended Douglas's executive role permanently on January 27th. He resigned 2 days later. The investigation continued. The compliance attorney found 3 additional payments to Renee Calloway over the previous year. 2 described as research expenses, 1 as travel reimbursement for a trip to Scottsdale, that 2 other employees confirmed they had attended and Renee Calloway had not. $62,000 in total. Not a catastrophic sum by Apex standards, but a significant and documentable breach of fiduciary duty, compounded by the false representations Douglas had made to a board that had trusted him with majority operational authority. The board voted to pursue full recovery. Seth Granger called Claire directly. He spoke carefully, in the measured tones of a man who understands that he has been on the wrong side of things and is attempting to reposition. I want you to know, he said, that I didn't know about the consulting arrangement. I believe you, Claire said. We're restructuring the leadership team. The board has asked whether Hargrove Capital would consider greater involvement going forward. Frank handles those conversations, she said, but I'll pass along the interest. Of course. A pause. She's healthy? The baby? Very. Good. That's good. She could feel his discomfort. She did not try to alleviate it. She said goodbye and hung up. Spring came slowly that year, not dramatically, not with any particular announcement, just the gradual shift from bare branches to the very first green suggestions at the tips of things. The yard beginning to think about waking up. She had decided to replant the backyard garden, not the kind Douglas had preferred. Structured, controlled, beds with clean geometric edges and plants that stayed exactly where you put them. Something different. She went to the nursery, the plant nursery, 3 miles away, where she spent 2 hours on a Saturday with Margaret in the carrier. She bought lavender, purple coneflower, black-eyed Susans that came back every year on their own without being asked. A climbing rose for the south fence, things that were hardy, things that survived without being managed. Agnes came on the Saturday they planted. They worked on their knees in the dirt together. The soil cold and good-smelling. The sun finally warm enough. Agnes hummed something low under her breath, a song Claire remembered from childhood without being able to name it. Margaret sat in the grass in her play yard nearby. She was investigating a stick with the focused intensity of a scientist. She kept putting it in her mouth. Agnes redirected her, each time with cheerful patience. Claire's hands were covered in soil. She looked at her hands, at the garden taking shape around her, at Agnes, at her daughter. She was not happy in the uncomplicated way she had been at the beginning of her marriage, when everything had been bright and new and unexamined. This was something different, something quieter and less fragile. She was present, completely present, in her own life. She was beginning to see, looking back at the past year, something she hadn't been able to see from inside it. She had been fighting to keep a marriage that had never fully existed. She had been pouring herself into a shape that had been chosen for her. And when it ended, when the thing she had feared most actually happened, she had not collapsed. She had signed proxy documents in active labor. She had held her daughter with steady hands. She had made her list. She had called her lawyer. She had done the thing. I was never the problem, she thought, kneeling in the dirt. I was the gold, not her father's gold, not Douglas's gold, or anyone else's, just herself, solid and real and worth considerably more than she had been taught to accept. She dug her hands deeper into the soil. She planted the coneflower roots firmly. She was beginning to laugh again. 1 year later, Margaret had 6 teeth strong opinions about the color of her bowls, and a laugh that Agnes described as entirely too loud for something that small. Claire had moved 3 things into her life in the past year that had not been there before. The first was work, not because she needed the income. She didn't, not immediately, but because she needed something that was hers, built by her hands, her ideas, her purpose. She had started doing pro bono work for a nonprofit that assisted women navigating financial abuse in marriage. Women who had been quietly drained, accounts emptied, credit destroyed, independence surgically removed over years so gradually that the women themselves had stopped being certain what had happened. Claire understood that experience, not identically, but in its structure, in its particular quality of becoming invisible inside your own life. Within 6 months, she was chairing the advisory board. The second thing was therapy. Not because she was falling apart. She wasn't. But because she had spent 18 months having her perception systematically undermined by someone she trusted completely. There were still moments, quieter moments, when she caught herself second-guessing things she knew to be true, editing herself before she spoke, waiting for the response before she committed to what she actually thought. Therapy was about reclaiming the certainty she had always had, the directness, the groundedness, getting it back, one session at a time, until it was simply hers, again, and not something she had to reach for. The third thing was the garden. The lavender had come in beautifully. The coneflower stood tall. The climbing rose along the south fence had put out more blooms than she had expected in its first season. The black-eyed Susans had spread in the way that black-eyed Susans do, making more of themselves without anyone asking them to. The garden was wild in the best sense of the word. It was hers. Her father came on Sundays now. This was new. Before the divorce, before everything, his visits had been formal and infrequent. William Hargrove was a man who scheduled, who arrived in a suit and stayed for dinner and asked about her life in the careful way of someone who cares deeply but was not taught how to show it softly. Now he came in casual clothes. He helped with Margaret in the genuine, uncertain way of a grandfather, learning the specific language of a particular grandchild. He was uncertain about the right technique for feeding at mealtimes. He was wholly certain about how to walk in a garden with a small person on his shoulders. He had told Claire something about 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. He said it in the kitchen, standing at the counter with his coffee, looking out the window. "I blame myself," he said, "for not telling you about the Apex shares before the marriage, for staying quiet while all of it was happening." "Dad, Dush, I thought if I said nothing, you'd have a real marriage, a real choice made freely." He paused. "Instead, I just left you without information you needed." Dad. She had crossed the kitchen and taken his hand, something they did not do often. "You couldn't have known who he was. I didn't know who he was. And you amended the trust after the wedding. You updated everything. You were protecting me the whole time." He was very still. "You raised me to think clearly and act when ready," she said. "That's what I did. Everything I did with the tools you gave me." His hand tightened around hers once, briefly. For William Hargrove, that was everything. The nonprofit's annual fundraiser was in April. Claire had organized it herself. 3 months of work. An event at a venue downtown. 200 attendees. A keynote from a woman who had rebuilt her life from a financially devastating marriage and was now running a regional advocacy organization. Claire had written the opening remarks herself. She stood at the podium in a dress she had chosen carefully. Simple. Dark blue, her mother's pearl earrings, her own posture, her own voice, her own words. She looked out at the room, 200 faces, women mostly, Some men, some young, some her parents' age, people who had come because they cared about the work, people who had come because they knew someone who needed the work, and some, she knew, who had come because they had needed it themselves. She spoke. I want to start with something that might seem small, she said. There is a moment, in these situations, that most people don't talk about. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Nobody would make a movie about it. It's the moment you're standing somewhere ordinary, a hallway, a kitchen, your car in the driveway at night, and you hear something, or see something, or simply feel something, and you think, I know. Not, I suspect. Not, I'm probably overthinking. I know. And then you have a choice. You can talk yourself back out of it. You can take the easier path, which is to not know, which is to let what you know become something softer and more manageable, something that doesn't require you to act. Or you can go get your water and stand at the kitchen counter and let yourself know what you know and think about what comes next. A pause. The room was quiet. I will tell you something that took me a long time to understand, she said. The women who come through this organization's doors are not weak women. They are not naive women. They are not women who missed obvious signs or failed to pay attention. They are women who loved someone, who tried, who kept trying, long past the point where someone who loved them less would have stopped. And when they finally stopped, when they finally said, I know what I know, and I'm going to do something about it, those women did not collapse. They organized. They made lists. They called lawyers. They signed documents. They did the thing. Because that's who they were the whole time. That's who you are. Another pause. If you are in the middle of something right now, if you are in the hallway, if you are standing at the kitchen counter at 11 o'clock at night, not knowing what comes next, I want you to know that the answer is already in you. You have had it the whole time. You just have to let yourself know what you know. The room was very still. Then it wasn't. She stepped down from the podium into the warmth of the room. People came to her, said things. She received them with genuine attention, one at a time. She had learned, this year, how to be present for others without emptying herself in the process. That was one of the lessons that had cost the most and given the most. At the end of the evening, near the exit, her shoes beginning to press the wrong way and her coffee cold in her hand, a man approached her. She recognized him vaguely. He had been at one of the tables near the front. He had bid generously in the auction. He had laughed at exactly the right moments during the keynote. The program you described, he said, the financial literacy component for women in crisis. That's something I've been looking to fund for 2 years. His name was Thomas Bradfield, 41. He ran a private foundation. He had the quality of men who are genuinely interested and have decided that honesty is the only approach worth attempting. They talked for 22 minutes. He did not ask for her number. He gave her his card and said, if you'd like to have a conversation about the program, I'd very much like to take that meeting. She took the card, looked at it, put it in her clutch. She did not call for 2 weeks. She thought about it, talked to Patty, who said, you don't have to, but you also don't have to not. She called on a Thursday morning. She thought of it, at first, as a meeting, a conversation with someone who was interested in her work and had been direct about it, and had not tried to make her feel small. Those were, she had learned, the things she valued most in a person. Everything else could be discovered slowly, at whatever pace felt right. She was in no hurry. She was, for the first time in a long time, exactly where she was supposed to be. Her future was opening in a direction she had never let herself imagine. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just opening, the way spring does, without any particular warning, just suddenly and completely there. Margaret said her first clear word in late March. She had been working up to it for weeks. sound experiments conducted with the seriousness of a researcher testing hypotheses. Consonants, serious babbling, deep consideration of the results. Agnes and Claire had been running a low-stakes competition about which word it would be. Agnes was certain it would be more, based on the bowl situation. Claire thought it would be no, which was functionally how Margaret communicated most preferences. They were both wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon. Claire was kneeling in the garden, 6 feet away, hands in the dirt, the lavender in its second spring. Her father was in the chair on the patio with his coffee, watching Margaret practice standing against the low stone wall at the garden's edge. Margaret let go of the wall. She took 2 steps, extremely determined, slightly sideways. She sat down hard in the grass. She looked up. She said, "Mama," not a sound, not an approximation. Clear, specific, aimed directly at Claire. William Hargrove made a sound from his chair. Agnes appeared in the back doorway. "Well, that settles it." Claire sat in the dirt with soil on her hands and looked at her daughter and felt something so complete that no word she had for feelings quite fit it. Not happiness exactly, not relief, not triumph, something that contained all of those and was quieter than any of them. Something that simply felt like, yes, this is it. She thought about the hallway sometimes, not obsessively, not with recurring pain, more the way you think about a photograph of somewhere you used to live, recognizing the geography, understanding that you have moved. She thought, what if she hadn't gotten up for water that night? What if she had still been asleep when he made that call? She would have continued. The board meeting would have happened differently. The share dilution would have passed. Douglas would have won that particular hand without even knowing he was playing it. But she had gotten up. She had been slow, 8 months pregnant, and moving carefully down the dark hallway. She had heard 2 words she was not supposed to hear. She had gone back to the kitchen and gotten her water and stood at the island for 11 minutes. She thought about those 11 minutes now. What had been happening inside her in that stillness? Not panic, not the collapse she might have expected, something older and more fundamental, something that said, you know. Now figure out what to do. She had been preparing her whole life for that moment without knowing it. The father who had taught her to feel first and act second. The education that had shown her that numbers were not impenetrable. The instinct she had always had, which had been taught over 18 months to doubt itself, which had survived that teaching and waited. She had been ready. She had not known it, but she had been ready. The spring fundraiser was larger in its second year. 260 attendees, a waiting list for the first time, 3 major funders. One of them was Thomas Bradfield, who had become, over the course of several long conversations about program design and organizational structures and, eventually, dinners that were only partially about work, someone she looked forward to seeing. She was not in a rush. She was not looking for the rescue, or for a replacement, or for the kind of fast, compensating love that makes people feel whole by making them dependent. She was looking for someone whose company she found genuinely good, who asked real questions, who listened to the answers, who did not require her to be smaller in order to feel larger himself. She was looking with clear eyes, and she had all the time she needed. She spoke at the fundraiser again. She had almost not prepared remarks this year, had thought about simply thanking everyone and stepping back. But 2 women had called the week before to tell her that her words from the previous year had stayed with them through things they had had to do. One of them said, "When I was sitting in my car, outside my attorney's office, not sure I could go in, I thought about what you said, about knowing what you know, and I went in." So she prepared remarks. She stood at the podium, Her father was in the third row, left side. He had come in his suit this time. This was an occasion. She found his face in the room. He was looking at her with the expression that had replaced, over this past year, the careful measured pride of before. Something more direct now, more present, as if he had decided there was no longer any reason to manage the feeling, to keep it at an appropriate distance. She smiled at him. He nodded once. Last year, she said, I talked about the moment of knowing. This year, I want to talk about what comes after. Because knowing is only the beginning. Knowing is the moment in the hallway, the moment in the car, the moment at 2 in the morning with your phone in your hand. What comes after knowing is harder and longer and less dramatic, and nobody tells you quite how much it costs. It costs sleep, it costs certainty for a while, it costs the version of yourself you thought you were building. But here's what I want you to know about that cost. What you was when you leave, when you finally, truly leave, is not yourself. It only feels like it for a while. What you lose is the version of yourself that had been shaped around someone else's needs. The edited version, the smaller version. And what grows back? She paused. What grows back is not smaller. It is not cautious. It is not grateful for less than it deserves. What grows back is you. The original you. The one who existed before anyone taught you to take up less space. She looked out at the room. You were never the problem. You were the solution someone didn't deserve. The room was quiet for a moment. Then it wasn't. She drove home through the city at 10:15. The streets quiet. The spring air through the cracked window, cool and soft. That particular quality she had noticed last April and looked for ever since. Something finished. Something beginning. The temperature of transition. Her coffee was cold in the cup holder. She didn't mind. She drove past the lake where her mother's ashes had been scattered 10 years ago now. She did not stop. She just noted it. The dark water visible between the trees for a moment. The particular stillness of it. She drove past the bakery on Ponce de Leon Avenue, closed at this hour, but lit inside, someone cleaning up after the day. She could see the warm yellow light through that glass. She thought, I would like an almond croissant tomorrow morning. Not because of any association, not because someone had once driven 40 minutes to get her one and she had taken that gesture as evidence of love, just because she liked them. Because that was a thing that was true about her, that had always been true about her, that belonged entirely to her. She turned onto her street. She thought about what she had said at the podium and whether it had been the right thing to say. She thought it had been. Not perfect, but real. She thought about her father in the third row with that expression. She thought about Margaret in the garden saying Mama. She thought about standing at a kitchen island at 11 o'clock at night with a glass of water and 11 minutes of silence. She had spent 3 years making herself smaller so he would feel larger. She had called it love. She had called it consideration. She had called it being a good partner. She had called it everything except what it actually was. It was not love. It was disappearing on purpose. A little bit at a time, until you look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman looking back. She was done disappearing. She pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for a moment. Not the paralyzed sitting of before, not 22 minutes with the engine off, and her hands in her lap and her stomach full of dread. Just a moment, a chosen pause, a breath between one thing and the next. The lights were on inside the house, the nursery window glowing soft from the nightlight, the kitchen light Agnes had left on. She thought about the woman who had stood in this hallway, 8 months pregnant, with a glass of water and heard 2 words. She thought about what that woman had done next, how quietly, how precisely, how entirely without drama. I was never the gold digger, she thought. I was the gold, not her father's gold. Not the shares or the proxy or the 54%. Just herself. Solid, present, permanent, worth considerably more than she had been taught to accept. She got out of the car. The spring night air was cool against her face. Something blooming nearby. The neighbor's forsythia, maybe. That specific yellow sweetness. She walked to the door. She opened it. The light came out warm, spilling onto the porch. And somewhere in the house, Agnes was humming something low and familiar, the same song she always hummed, the one Claire could never name but had known her whole life. And upstairs, her daughter was asleep. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A word she knew. Mama. Claire Hargrove stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. She stood in her hallway. Not the same hallway, not the same woman, not the same darkness and dread and glass of water held in a trembling hand. Different now. Everything different now. The same hallway, a different woman walking through it. She took off her coat. She hung it on the hook. She walked toward the sound of Agnes humming and the warm light of the kitchen and the particular quiet of a house that holds sleeping people. She came home. Really and completely home. For the first time in a very long time.
She didn't win because she was lucky. She didn't win because her father was rich. She won because when the moment came, when the floor dropped out and the person she had built her life around showed her exactly who he was, she didn't collapse. She got quiet, and she got to work. There is something I want you to hold on to after this story, not the drama, not the twist about the shares or the boardroom or the proxy signed in active labor. Those details are satisfying. They are deeply, completely satisfying. I will not pretend otherwise. But that is not the lesson. The lesson is this. Claire did not win because her father had money. She won because she trusted herself when someone had spent 1.5 years teaching her not to. That is the harder thing. That is the thing that costs more, because the money was always there. The shares were always there. The power was always there, quietly in the background, waiting. What almost wasn't there was her certainty, her voice, her ability to look at what she knew and say, I know what I know. I am not imagining this. I am not overreacting. I am not too sensitive, too emotional, too much. I am right, and I am going to do something about it. There are women listening to this right now who are in that hallway. Maybe not literally. Maybe the hallway is a text message you saw by accident, a charge on a credit card you weren't supposed to notice, a laugh that lasted a half second too long, a way he looks at you, or doesn't look at you, that has changed in a way you can't quite put into words, but cannot stop feeling. And someone in your life, maybe him, maybe someone close to you, maybe the voice inside your own head that has been so thoroughly managed. That voice is saying, you're imagining it. You're reading into things. You're 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and you're making this into something it isn't. I want to say something directly to you. You are not imagining it. You know what you know. The prison door has been unlocked the whole time. The key has been in your hand. You have simply been told, repeatedly and cleverly, that the door was never a door at all. It is a door. You can open it, and what is on the other side is not emptiness. It is not starting from zero with nothing. It is you, the original you, the one who existed before anyone taught you to edit yourself before you spoke, before you apologized for your reactions, before you made yourself smaller to make someone else feel larger. That woman is still there. She is waiting. She has been waiting patiently the whole time. and she is so much stronger than you have been allowed to believe. Claire planted a wild garden where the controlled, geometric one used to be. She chairs a board now. She raises her daughter. She laughs with her best friend in the kitchen. Her father comes on Sundays in his casual clothes and walks Margaret through the lavender beds on his shoulders. Her life is not perfect. It is better than perfect. It is real. It is hers. It is built by her own hands from the ground up. And it started in a dark hallway with a glass of water and 11 minutes of silence, and a woman who decided to trust what she already knew. That is the whole story. That is all of it. You already have everything you need. You just have to let yourself know what you know. This content was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team with the sole intention of bringing you stories that carry real meaning, real healing, and real lessons about the strength that lives quietly inside every woman who has ever been made to feel invisible. We do not tell these stories for entertainment alone. We tell them because someone out there needs to hear exactly this, exactly today. And we believe that story finds the person it was made for. Thank you for being here.